The first night I worked as a park ranger in Yellowstone, the radio crackled at exactly 3:03 a.m. A voice that sounded exactly like mine whispered, "Don't look outside." But when I did, I saw a figure standing at the tree line, wearing my uniform, smiling back at me. That's when I realized the rules they gave me weren't meant to protect me. They were meant to contain something else. The first night felt like standing at the edge of the world. I'd driven 8 hours from Bozeman to reach Yellowstone's northern sector, a stretch of forest so remote it didn't even show up properly on GPS. The ranger station that housed Firewatch Tower 17 was half buried in snow, its wooden steps slick with frost and age. Everything around me smelled like wet stone and sulfur, the kind of scent that clings to your lungs. I was 34, divorced, and trying to start over. The EMT job had broken me. Too many faces I couldn't save, too many nights replaying sirens in my head. I wanted quiet, isolation, a place where no one would need me. Yellowstone seemed perfect, until I actually got there. Senior Ranger Thomas Reed greeted me with the kind of handshake that feels like a warning. He was tall but slouched, his skin weathered and his eyes bloodshot. Not from drink, but from watching too much for too long. "Night patrol's simple," he said. "Log activity every 2 hours. Report any fire, any poachers, any lights." "Lights?" I asked. He paused, chewing on the inside of his cheek. "You'll see. Just don't watch them for too long." I smiled, thinking it was park lore. Every old ranger had their stories. But Reed didn't smile back. He looked at the dark tree line beyond the tower, and for a second I thought I saw movement there, a shimmer, like heat rising from asphalt. Before leaving, he handed me an old, beaten radio and muttered, "Keep your lights dim. The forest doesn't like to be seen." When night fell, the tower creaked with every gust of wind. The metal roof groaned, the old bulb above the desk flickered, and somewhere in the distance, a geyser screamed. It sounded almost human. Around midnight, I made coffee, logged the temperature, and looked out across the valley. The world was still, too still. The stars hung so low they felt touchable, and the snow below shimmered faintly in the moonlight. That's when I saw them, tiny orbs of yellow light, moving between the trees. At first, I thought it was lanterns, campers, maybe, but the lights didn't sway with footsteps. They floated, smooth, deliberate, circling each other like insects caught in a slow orbit. I blinked, and one of them stopped moving, as if it knew I was watching. For a moment, the whole forest seemed to exhale. By dawn, the forest looked harmless again, golden sunlight pouring through the pines, steam rising off the geyser fields like ghosts stretching after sleep. The terror from the night before felt almost childish in the daylight. Almost. I brewed instant coffee, checked the logbook, and that's when I saw it. An envelope taped neatly to the side of the radio. Old paper. Edges yellowed. My name scrawled across the front in thick, blocky letters. Protocol. Night duty. Firewatch Tower 17. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed on an old machine. The letters faded near the edges, as if they'd been printed decades ago. The rules were simple. Too simple. After 10:46 p.m., do not answer the radio unless the caller uses your full name. If the northern lights appear red, face the floor and cover your ears until they fade. Between 12 o'clock and 1 a.m., you may hear someone climbing the tower stairs. Don't look. Don't speak. Never shine your flashlight toward the old faithful basin after midnight. If you see a second tower's light in the distance, ignore it. There's only one tower. If something knocks twice on the door, it's wind. If it knocks 3 times, it isn't. Don't acknowledge voices calling from below the tower, especially if they sound familiar. Keep the logbook open. If a new entry appears that you didn't write, read it aloud once, then burn the page. Leave before 5:13 a.m. The forest changes after that. I read them twice, waiting for a punchline. There wasn't one, just a faint smell of ozone coming off the paper, like it had been too close to lightning. When I radioed Reed, his voice came through thin and ragged, like he hadn't slept in years. "Did you get the list?" "Yeah. Some kind of joke, right?" He didn't laugh. Not even a grunt. Don't test them, Lucas. Not even one. The radio clicked dead. For a moment, I just sat there, watching steam rise from the coffee mug. The silence pressed in from all sides, like the forest itself was listening. By midday, I convinced myself Reed was just screwing with me. Every station had its ghost stories, drunk hikers, vanishings, weird lights in the sky. You couldn't work this job without a few. Still, something about those rules bothered me. They were written like procedures, not warnings. Whoever made them didn't just believe in them. They followed them. That night, I kept the list beside the radio. Call it superstition, or maybe paranoia, but when the sun dipped and the temperature dropped to near freezing, I locked the tower door and double-checked every latch. The forest below was swallowed in fog. Every sound carried too far. The crack of ice shifting, the whistle of wind through broken branches. At exactly 10:45, the radio crackled alive. Ranger Grant, this is Control. Copy. The voice was distorted, echoing, like it was bouncing through a tunnel. I hesitated, remembering the first rule. Don't answer unless they use your full name. 10 seconds of silence. Then, Lucas Grant, this is Control. Do you read me? My chest tightened. The timing was too exact, as if it had waited for me to remember. I lifted the receiver slowly. Copy that. Static answered. Then a second voice, quieter, almost a whisper beneath the first. Good. Now we can see you. The line went dead. I stared out across the valley. And for the briefest moment, far beyond the tree line, I saw it. Another watchtower light, faint but steady, blinking from a ridge that didn't exist on any map. Rule number 5 whispered in my head like a heartbeat. There's only one tower. The first full night on duty was calm, in that uneasy way silence sometimes feels like a hell breath. By 11, the forest below was nothing but a sheet of black, the tree line invisible, the horizon swallowed by fog. The only light came from the dim bulb over my desk and the faint amber glow of the heater. Even the crickets had gone quiet. I logged temperatures, wind speed, visibility, all the standard notes, and told myself I'd get used to the stillness. That was before the footsteps. At 12:03 a.m., a faint creak echoed up from the tower's base. Then another. Boots on wood. Slow. Measured. Climbing. My first instinct was to check the stairs, maybe a hiker lost in the dark or a ranger dropping by unannounced. But my hand froze an inch from the flashlight. Rule number 3. Between 12 o'clock and 1 a.m., you may hear someone climbing. Don't look. Don't speak. The steps came closer, one at a time, deliberate, heavy, like whoever it was knew I was listening. Creak. Pause. Creak. I held my breath and waited. When they reached the last step, the sound stopped. Silence filled the tower so thick I could hear my own heartbeat. Then knock. 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 3 perfect taps against the door. Slow. Careful. I whispered under my breath. It's just the wind. But the air was still. Not even the curtains stirred. Another 3 knocks followed, softer this time, almost patient. I stood motionless for what felt like minutes. The sound didn't come again. Finally, I forced myself to lean over the grated floor, peering through the narrow slits of steel toward the stairs below. Nothing. Just the dark yawning back up at me. By 12:45, I convinced myself it was my imagination. Sound travels strangely through wooden structures. I'd learned that much. Then, at 1:17 a.m., the radio came alive. It wasn't the sharp crackle of static. It was a breath, soft, wet, close. Then a voice. Lucas. It said my name slowly, like tasting it. Not Ranger Grant. Not Lucas Grant. Just Lucas. The same way Emma used to say it, before she died in that crash 2 winters ago. I froze. Every part of me wanted to answer, to ask who it was. But the sound grew distorted, warping into laughter that wasn't laughter at all. More like something trying to mimic it. I unplugged the radio. The silence that followed was somehow worse. For the rest of the night, I sat in the corner of the tower with my flashlight aimed at the door, waiting for dawn. By sunrise, everything looked normal again. The forest was calm, golden, peaceful, as if none of it had happened. But something had changed. I noticed it when I opened the logbook. Between my notes from midnight and 2 a.m., there was a new entry I hadn't written. 12:39 a.m. He heard her voice. It worked. The handwriting was identical to mine. Every curve, every letter. I tore the page out, my fingers shaking. Rule number 8 came rushing back to me. Keep the logbook open. If a new entry appears that you didn't write, read it aloud once, then burn the page. I didn't read it. I should have. Instead, I shoved it into the trash and went outside to clear my head. The air was colder than before. The pine needles glittered with frost, and the distant valley shimmered faintly, thin ribbons of light curling low through the trees. Northern lights, I thought. Aurora activity sometimes reached this far south. But then I remembered rule number 2. If the northern lights appear red, face the floor and cover your ears until they fade. And the glow down there wasn't green or blue. It was deep crimson, slow, pulsing like something alive breathing beneath the forest floor. I turned away, heart pounding. That's when I saw it. Far across the ridge, a pinprick of white light blinking through the fog. A signal light. Another tower. Except Firewatch Tower 17 was the only one in this quadrant. Rule number 5 whispered through my mind again, cold and steady. If you see a second tower's light in the distance, ignore it. There's only one tower. I didn't ignore it. I stared, trying to make sense of it. And in that faint light, for just a heartbeat, I thought I saw someone standing on the other platform, waving at me. The third night started like the others, cold, empty, uneventful. The forest had that strange, unnatural quiet again, as if every creature had stopped breathing. Even the wind seemed to avoid the tower, brushing the trees instead of the metal supports beneath my feet. By 1:30 a.m., fatigue began to set in. My coffee had gone cold, the radio sat silent, and I'd almost convinced myself that the last few nights had just been tricks of the mind. Stress, isolation, exhaustion, the perfect mix for hallucinations. Then I saw it. Across the valley, far beyond the ridge where the mist was thickest, a light blinked, faint but steady, like a distant beacon. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, but it was still there. Another tower. Rule number 5 came to mind immediately. If you see a second tower's light in the distance, ignore it. There's only one tower. But this wasn't a reflection, and it wasn't my imagination. The pattern of light looked deliberate. 3 short flashes, 1 long. A signal. Someone was out there. The thought of another ranger, another living, breathing person, hit me like warmth in a frozen room. I hadn't spoken to anyone in 3 days. Reed hadn't checked in. The radio had stayed eerily quiet. Maybe it was a relief I didn't want to question. I grabbed my flashlight, opened a small side window, and shined a return signal. 3 flashes. Just to say I saw them. That's when the radio crackled to life. Not the soft static I'd grown used to. This was wet, heavy static like breathing through broken glass. A low, jagged whisper cut through it. You shouldn't have done that. The voice wasn't Reed's. It wasn't human. It sounded like something trying to form words with lungs full of water. I froze, the flashlight still in my hand, beam trembling against the wall. When I looked back across the ridge, the light in the other tower was gone. But someone or something was still there. I could see a shape, silhouetted by the faint glow of the moon. A figure standing where the tower had been. It waved again, a slow, deliberate motion. Then it began to climb down the ladder. Except it wasn't shrinking. Every rung it descended. It seemed to grow larger, taller, as though the perspective was bending the wrong way. The figure's arms were too long, its shoulders too wide. I turned off my light, heart pounding, watching it vanish into the dark treeline below. For a few minutes, I told myself I was fine, that it had been a trick of shadows or exhaustion. Then the sound began. Footsteps, slow, wet, deliberate, circling the tower's base. The boards creaked under something heavy, shifting back and forth, pacing. I couldn't see it from the windows, but I could hear it, dragging something across the frozen earth. Once it stopped directly below me. Silence. Then 3 dull thuds, like a hand slapping against the underside of the floor. My breath caught. I gripped the rifle leaning by the door, more for comfort than defense, and stayed perfectly still until the first light of dawn. When the sun finally broke over the ridge, I dared to look outside. Nothing moved. The forest was calm again. I climbed down the stairs, every nerve still on edge. The air smelled strange, metallic, like rust and rain, even though the ground was dry. That's when I saw them. Footprints. Human footprints, bare, deep, and uneven, circling the tower. They weren't mine. They started at the tree-line, moved around the base several times, and stopped at the first step of the staircase. But what froze my blood wasn't the footprints. It was the wood. The lowest rung of the ladder had been carved into. Long, deep claw marks raked across the grain, splintering the surface as if something had tested it, deciding whether to climb. I backed away slowly, my breath steaming in the cold morning air. When I finally returned to the cabin, I noticed something else on the desk, something that hadn't been there the night before. A piece of torn paper from the logbook. On it, scrawled in my handwriting, were 5 words. "It saw your light, Lucas." I burned it immediately, but the smell of smoke lingered, sweet, like pine and blood. That was the moment I stopped laughing at the rules. Morning came gray and heavy, the sunlight weak and colorless as it filtered through a haze of mist. The forest below looked frozen in place, every branch sharp and brittle under the frost. I hadn't slept. Every creak of the tower through the night had felt like a heartbeat, and I couldn't shake the sound of those footsteps pacing in circles around me. I needed answers. I tore through every drawer, every cabinet, hoping to find a rational explanation. Maintenance records, ranger logs, anything that could prove this wasn't what it seemed. My hands were shaking when I found it. A thick, water-stained logbook wedged beneath a stack of outdated fire maps. The cover read Yellowstone Fire Watch Record, 1996. The pages were warped, the ink bleeding at the edges, but most entries were ordinary enough at first. June 4th, heavy wind from the west. Elk herd crossing river. June 5th, temperature drop. Visibility low. Aurora activity forecasted. Then the tone changed. The handwriting got tighter, the letters slanting, frantic. June 7th. Reed says it's not a park anymore. It's a border. June 9th. The lights in the valley aren't storms. They move wrong. They hum when you close your eyes. June 10th. If we stop watching, the forest forgets where the world ends. That line stuck in my head. The forest forgets where the world ends. I flipped through faster, heart pounding. The entries grew erratic. One page was covered in smeared graphite sketches, outlines of faces half buried in bark, shapes hanging upside down between trees, a second tower drawn over and over again in the margins. The next entry was short. June 12th. The lights have names. They whisper them when the wind dies. The page after that was blank, except for a fingerprint pressed deep into the paper, as if someone had left it there in blood. Then, on the second-to-last page, I found something that made my stomach turn. June 13th. Tower 17 compromised. I'm hearing my own voice on the radio. Don't answer when it calls your name. The signature beneath the line wasn't Thomas Reed's. It was mine. I stared at it for a long time, the air in the cabin turning sharp and thin. The signature was identical. My loops, my spacing, the small downward hook I made on the L. But the ink was aged, faded into the paper. I flipped the page again, desperate to find something that could explain it. But the final sheet was torn out completely, the remnants of its edges singed. The radio crackled behind me. For the first time in hours, the static wasn't random. It had rhythm, soft, pulsing like breathing. Then a voice. "Lucas." I didn't move. The tone was flat, detached. But it wasn't distant. It wasn't even coming from the radio. It was coming from behind me. "Lucas," it said again. I turned slowly. The tower was empty. The door was still locked. But the logbook on the desk had flipped open to a new page. A fresh line of ink appeared across the paper, the pen still resting beside it, though I hadn't touched it. June 14th. He found the log. He knows now. And beneath that, as the ink still wetly bled into the paper. He's next. The air around me changed. A faint vibration through the floor, through the desk, like something large moving deep below the tower. The forest outside was motionless, but the light through the window had turned strange, tinted red, shimmering faintly in the fog. The same red Reed had warned me about. The same red I wasn't supposed to look at. I dropped the logbook, grabbed the radio, and whispered, "Reed, if you're still out there, tell me what the hell this place is." For a moment, only static. Then his voice, ragged, distant, trembling. "Lucas, you're not at the border anymore." Static swallowed the rest. "You're in it." The aurora came early that night, a red curtain bleeding across the horizon, its light pulsing like the slow beat of a dying heart. It wasn't the soft green shimmer I'd seen in photos. It looked like the sky itself was on fire, the color of raw muscle and blood. Rule number 2 burned in my mind. If the northern lights appear red, face the floor and cover your ears until they fade. But then I heard it, a scream cutting through the forest. High, sharp, human. It came again. Closer. Help. It sounded like Reed. My irrational brain kicked in. It couldn't be him. He hadn't checked in for days. Still, instinct won over reason. I rushed to the window and looked out. The trees were moving. Not swaying, moving. Their trunks rippled like water, bending toward the tower. Branches twisted and folded into shapes that almost looked human. And within that crimson light, I saw them. Faces. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Fading in and out of the mist, their eyes wide, their mouths open but silent, as if screaming without sound. The radio sparked behind me. Static hissed, then broke into a voice. "Lucas." Except this time, it wasn't Emma's voice. It was mine. I froze. "Lucas, it's me. You can come down now." Every muscle in my body locked. Slowly, I stepped toward the window, heart hammering. Below, at the base of the tower, stood me. Same jacket, same ranger badge, same scar across my left brow. He was waving. For a moment, the world fell silent. No wind, no creaking wood, no sound at all. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. And as he smiled, the forest changed. The red aurora dimmed, not fading, but focusing, pulling its light inward until it gathered around the other me like a halo. The trees bent toward him, their twisted faces turning to watch. He tilted his head up toward me. "You looked," he said, and his voice came from everywhere, the air, the walls, the static. The tower groaned, shaking under my feet. Something was climbing fast. Each step on the metal ladder rattled the structure, too heavy, too quick to be human. I grabbed my flashlight, shone it through the grate, and saw fingers. Pale, thin, stretching through the slats, pressing up from below. They weren't climbing, they were reaching. The red light surged brighter, flooding the room, swallowing the shadows. I stumbled backward, covering my eyes, but it was too late. I'd broken the rule. I'd looked, and now, the forest knew exactly where I was. When I opened my eyes, everything was quiet, too quiet. The humming of the tower, the howl of the wind, gone. Instead, I heard the low buzz of fluorescent lights and the rhythmic ticking of a clock. I was in an office, a warm one. The brass plate on the desk read Yellowstone Ranger Headquarters. Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, turning the dust in the air into gold. For a few seconds, I thought it had all been a nightmare, that I'd fallen asleep during my shift and dreamed the entire thing. Then the door opened. A young ranger stepped in, clipboard tucked under his arm, smiling the way only someone new to the job can. "You're Lucas Grant, right?" he said. "Tower 17 needs a replacement tonight. You're assigned there." I sat up fast, my pulse spiking. No, wait. I was already there. Something. But he didn't hear me. He was already gone, the door swinging shut behind him. That's when I noticed the envelope on the desk. Fresh. White. Sealed. Across the front. Written in my own handwriting. Protocol. Night duty. Fire watch Tower 17. My fingers trembled as I tore it open. Same paper. Same smell of ozone. Same 9 rules. But this time, There was a new one, printed neatly at the bottom in darker ink. 10. If you see yourself at the base of the tower, don't wave back. He's already watching. I looked up from the page, out the office window. In the distance, through the haze of morning light, I could see Tower 17. A single light blinked from the top. Once. Twice. Then, faintly, a hand waved.